maybe sometimes I need to let myself off and understand that I don't have to always be at 100%, because life in the background isn't always 100%.
Hello, welcome to the next edition of Adventures in Networking. Special edition today, Kelly.
It is indeed.
We're talking about a very important topic. So, caring and entrepreneurship, the ultimate balancing act. We're going to share with you why this is such a personal topic for us, why we've not really talked about it before, because that's quite important. Yeah. What it means for the network and the business that we are building. And what we've realised, Kelly, is this affects more people than you might realise.
Yeah, definitely.
But we're going to come on to that. So look, if you're a caregiver, and when we say caregiver, let's just define that quickly. If you've got elderly parents, young children, someone else who's got significant needs, special needs or something, it can be anything.
Medical,
yeah, medical. There's a lot, isn't there? So if you are in that sphere, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to read your comments. We can feature those on the show, and any tips, because as you will hear, we are very certainly in this space, and we'll take all the advice that we can get. So,
for sure.
Let's set the scene, Kelly. So this comes from you deciding finally to post about our experience on LinkedIn, and to say the response was phenomenal is an understatement. Tell us about that post. What was in it, and how did it, and what was the reaction like?
Okay, probably preface this with I've talked about our situation before on a couple of other people's podcasts, and it was actually Chris Wilson, one of our members, who started this journey off for me. I was going to say it's this year, it may have even been last year, as to understand that, yes, hello Lisa, absolutely you can talk about this, and I've never been ashamed to talk about it, but I've never known whether it was relevant to talk about it previously. And over the last couple of years, absolutely, it's become relevant. And we'll talk about more about that in a second. But that post was National Caregivers Week. And I just thought, gosh, that's been our life for 17 years. And had a massive impact on me, and a massive impact on me in terms of being a business owner. So I just wanted to put a shout out to other people in that situation, because the more I talk about it, the more I come into contact with people in a similar space. And as you say, to say that the response was phenomenal was massive understatement. I mean, the comments, the likes, the reactions just went crazy. The private messages, the emails, the voice notes, the support from so many amazing people. Some I knew, a few I didn't, and the connections that have been made as a result of that, because people see me in a different space now and they can piece that together personally as well.
So for people who haven't seen the post, what is our situation? Who is this Ken person?
So Kennedy, she's got a few other names as well, and we won't share those today. No, I'm joking. Kennedy is our 17-year-old daughter. She is wonderful and frustrating, all rolled into one, as most children are, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? They have their good and bad points. But she's 17, but mentally she's only about 2.5, 3, and she will forever be around 2.5, 3. So her labels, which we don't really like to talk about, do we? But she has autism and ADHD on paper. That's what she's facing. But it runs a lot deeper than that. She has a SHANK3 gene mutation, which interestingly I also have, but it doesn't present anything within me. And she also has severe learning. Debatable. She also has severe learning difficulties. And that is probably the biggest challenge, because you can be aware of autism, you can be aware of ADHD and the gene mutation, and you can use behavioural strategies to help support. You can even use medication to support. But when you have such low comprehension and communication abilities, it kind of masks all of that stuff. Because if you can't have a conversation with somebody to ask them how they feel and what's going on with them, you can't really get any further down a process, be that medical or behavioural. So that's where we are.
2-year-old in a 17-year-old's body is the best way to understand it. If you've ever been around a 2-year-old, and you met Kennedy, you'd realise that in some respects she's not even to that level. Like things get muddled up and she doesn't perhaps have that level of comprehension. But you can imagine 17-year-old body, 2-year-old mind does create quite a set of problems. And the picture that you shared, we took her to see your favourite, Danny, Mummy Danny, as she's known, as he's known as, from the script. She loved it, didn't she?
She did love it, yeah. And that was a real pivotal point for us as well, isn't it? Because I'm sure there's people out there, and certainly other fellow carers I've spoken to with children in a similar space, you do end up being in a bit of a bubble. You sort of stay in your own four walls, and you might go out and do things, but you don't necessarily do them as a family or as a, as a big group of people, because it's just easier to deal with that situation one-to-one and limit the amount of kind of external factors that you have to bring into it. So it was a really good test for us, and she absolutely loved it, didn't she? She really did.
Look, it's Danny. Yeah. Even telling that story, so you might be watching this and saying to yourself, well, what's this got to do with business? And as we're saying it, Kelly, I can see that perspective, and that, by the way, is the reason that we don't lead with that message or make that much of it, because in some respects it's not that much to do with our business, but for many reasons it is absolutely relevant to the type of business that we're building, the people that we're trying to help, isn't it? But I think it was very important to you, and it continues to be important, that you don't want excuses, and you don't want your situation, you don't want to be defined by that situation, or the business be defined by that situation, because you can tip easily into the, I just want to get attention, and I want to, kind of capitalize on the sympathy.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't like, isn't it?
Even putting this conversation on today, I had a cold sweat, didn't I? And we debated whether doing it, because it didn't feel like, that's not why I put that message out there. It wasn't to raise awareness of only, or to say, oh, look how great I am. It was genuinely to support other people in that space who might not be confident enough to share or have those conversations. And I thought, if I could just help one person, then that would be really, really good. So ethically, is it relevant to business? Not to everyone. No, of course it isn't. Is it relevant to us? Yeah, of course it is. Of course it's relevant to us. I've never wanted to be defined by being a carer for Kennedy. I've never wanted people to feel sorry for me. I've never wanted special treatment. But maybe I say this as much to myself. Maybe sometimes I need to let myself off and understand that I don't have to always be at 100%, because life in the background isn't always 100%. Equally, you might not be a carer. You might have other things going in your life. For me, it's all relative to the individual. Okay, what we deal with on a daily basis, personally and professional, will have an impact on our business. And for us as a family, it's me, you, husband and wife, and Kearney, our eldest daughter, who basically run the business. The key people that work in and around us, Izzy, Elsie, there's lots of other wonderful people that sit as part of that core. They feel like our family. And there is a reason for that, because our family is incredibly important to our business. We are carers by, personally, and we will continue to take that caring mentality through to our business, hence the community aspect of what we've built. So for us, it was incredibly important to be able to recognise we didn't want to rely on the state, because quite frankly, why would you rely on the state? Because it's incredibly unreliable. We couldn't guarantee to get good support from any of the authorities, because again, quite frankly, they're, depends where you live, I guess, overstretched and conflicting information, underfunded, and it feels like you're banging your head against a brick wall a lot of the time. So we took it into our own hands to say, okay, well, what are we going to do, and what business will we build in order to be able to have a successful business that we could scale, but also have the ability to be interchangeable enough to be full-time carers for Kennedy, for this child that we need to look after. And that was sort of the genesis of Only, and wanting to create a space where other business owners could come in and be supported and nurtured for whatever reason they have things going on in their background. It could just be that You don't drive, therefore you don't want to go to an in-person event. We wanted to be completely inclusive for everyone, but right up to that scale of people in the same camp as us where it's hard to commit to things because you have so much going on in your personal life too. And that's a huge why for us right from the beginning that we never shared right from the beginning. So we're just starting to share that now.
I think that also, and that reluctance to want to kind of put this out as a defining part of us and our business, which can easily tip into you're trying to get sympathy and trying to get attention.
Yep.
There's a counter to that, isn't there? Because there's so much, for the amount of people that talk about being your authentic self on social media and then do the complete opposite by just presenting this fake facade of the reality of their business. Woo, woo, look at me. I've done this and I've grown my business fourfold in a minute, all this nonsense. And I think it was really important to us once we had this conversation is to realize, look, you probably see from us, because we like to lead, Kelly, don't we, with the positive message. And we like to lead with, this is about, business and results and good relationships and things like that. We're probably adding to that illusionary kind of culture, aren't we? Of kind of going, well, everything's great for us, but it's not, is it? It is overall, but some days, because of the business, but some days because of our care and responsibilities, it's definitely not okay.
No, it's not. And I think I've got Lee Lamb to thank for this conversation, probably, haven't we? Because we've been sharing with our members this month what your why is and whether that's personal, business, practical, combination of the both. And I think for me, it's just really key to understand that business is hard. Life is hard, isn't it? It's forever getting more noisy and more, stuff going on. But to totally understand and appreciate that business and life, I hate the balance. There isn't a balance. It goes one or two ways. As long as business doesn't overtake or personal overtakes, then you're okay. But it definitely never balances. But in order to be truly authentic, you do have to tell people what's going on. Otherwise, you're not being authentic, are you? And I like what you say there, James. We do get involved in the shiny and we think it's really great for everybody else. And I'm super grateful. I love my life. I'm absolutely content as where I am. Of course, I'm quite materialistic. I want to buy something nice and I want to earn more money and all of that stuff that comes with being a business owner. But I never feel bad or sorry for myself because of the situation I'm in. And it's that cliche, there's always somebody out there that's got it worse than me. But there is always somebody out there that's got it worse. So I think it's about understanding your ability and your capacity, the resilience that you have to be able to just keep going through that process. Because it is like being a carer can feel a little bit like Groundhog Day sometimes. And a prime example of that for me is, well, we went out last night, didn't we? And then one of the neighbours said, "Oh, are you off somewhere nice?" I said, "Oh, no, parents' evening." He went, "Oh, you've got your face on today." Now, immediately I thought, cheeky sod, what do I normally look rubbish? But my neighbours might see me in that state because when I'm not on camera and I don't have my red lippy on because it makes me feel like I'm ready for the day, I'm in carer mode. I'm still me. I'm still the same person, and I would still treat you differently. I might not look exactly the same because I'm not ready to be in that space. So it's about understanding when you switch from one to the other and what you need to do in order to make that transition. My lipstick is a key one for me. If I don't have my red lippy on, I'm probably not feeling great. You wouldn't know it, but it just is that thing that makes me it's my superpower, I guess. It just makes me feel like I'm on top form. So if I haven't got it on, I've probably forgotten. And that's probably because by the time I've got Kennedy ready in the morning and got her out of the door on the bus to college, I can't be bothered to get myself ready because I've already just done that for somebody else. And that effect every day, sometimes it just knocks you a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? Well, you'd probably be in your pajamas if you haven't got a red lipstick on. That's normally the two things go hand in hand.
They
do. I just think if, like, kind of touching on what you said earlier about the fact that if we show people that, look, our reality is perhaps different to the way it's portrayed. There are days where we have to juggle things around, like Kennedy's ill, we have to go and get her, or the the situation around a college has changed or whatever it might be, or school holidays, for most people, once their kids are 17, school holidays, you can kind of say, well, look, I got these calls, you'll have to amuse yourselves, and you can't really do that with Kennedy. So I just hope that people watching this that have got young children, or people that they're caring for, realize that you can make it work, and you don't have to scream and shout about it, but don't be under the illusion that it's easy. There is a lot of kind of blood, sweat and tears that goes on behind the scenes, and you've kind of got permission for that to be okay, haven't you?
Definitely. And I think this conversation, we wanted to have this conversation was because I'm very happy for people to reach out to me, because you said this, I think we do make it look really easy, and it really isn't. That's not to say that we don't love every minute of it and we wouldn't change it for the world. No, of course not. I'd change the situation with Kennedy for Kennedy's sake, but I wouldn't change it for my sake, because she brings so much joy and so much pleasure to our lives in many ways, that we wouldn't have if she didn't have the challenges she faces. So I think for me, it's really important that you have the right people around you. And I think when you are drained personally, and that sounds very negative, and I don't mean it to sound that way, but when you do live in Groundhog Day and you're we have the same conversations over dinner. I have the same conversation in the morning when she wakes up. Like, it's fine, but it can be a bit of an emotional drain. You then need to make sure that when you're going off about your day, when you're not with that person, it's not just being drained by anybody else that you come into contact with. So for me, it is very important to have key people around me that just make me feel even more grateful for the life I've got, because I don't necessarily share all of that stuff with people. I don't feel the need to. There are a couple of key people that I will, of course, share more things with, and I'm hugely grateful for them. But I am somebody that keeps most of that inside. So to be around people that lighten that experience and enrich my life is important.
Networking is so important for that, isn't it? We're going to talk about the kind of changing nature of formal networking. I think if you're on social media and you're networking and you're presenting, and I understand why, by the way, if you are predominantly presenting a professional persona, weird word now, isn't it? Professional. But I just want to show you that I'm competent. I'm a thought leader. There's no chinks in the armor. I completely get it, because that's what kind of we've been taught, particularly our generation. We span generations, don't we? That's what you were supposed to do. You wouldn't talk about weaknesses or challenges, because it undermines you as a business leader. But I think until you find a way to network, whether that be via social media or networking events with people where you can be a little bit, and I use this word with, under advisory, with a little bit of vulnerability, share a little bit. Don't go on moaning. I think that's really important, isn't it? If you just moan at people, they're going to go, oh, there's that person who's going to moan a lot. But I think to open up and kind of share a bit of your experience and your challenges, most people will then share their own version of it. Whereas if you skate along the surface, just you tell me about my business and how great you are, and I'll tell you about my business and how great you are, you're never going to get that warmth and that feeling of support, are you, Kelly?
No, we are small fish in a big pond, most of us. I don't know anybody that's got a unique business or a unique job title. I don't. It doesn't exist, does it? Because we're all variations of something, and we sit in a particular industry. So our personality and what we're able to share personally differentiates us more so than ever, particularly in a time where we've been through what we've been through, not just in terms of the economy, but through the pandemic, the fallout of that, business being tough. We're battered and bruised, aren't we, as business owners? So we have more choice than ever. And in order to make a decision, we need a little bit more information in order to know who it is we want to work with, build alliances with, trust when we move through our business journey. So I think for me particularly, I am an oversharer. I think people overshare with me too, and I love being that person, because that's who I am, nosy, and I love finding out about people. But you don't have to go to that level, if you've just said, to show a level of vulnerability. And even if that's 1%, I could just say I'm a carer. I don't need to tell you who it is. I don't need to tell you the ins and outs of the details. I don't need to tell you that she's 17 and her name's Kennedy. I don't need to tell you any of that. But by me just telling you that I'm a full-time carer as well, you will see me differently, and you will log my information in your memory banks a little bit differently, because I've given you a bit more information about me personally. So, do as little or as much as that you feel comfortable with. But I think particularly in the caring space, and the reason we're having this conversation today, it can feel really lonely, and it can feel like you're on your own and that nobody else understands it. And the amount of conversations I have, I'm very happy to share this stuff in one-to-ones, and I have got better with that over the last 2 or 3 years, probably since Chris's podcast. I'm blown away by the amount of people that will go, oh my goodness, yeah, same, my daughter's the same, or my brother's got a son it sounds very similar to Kennedy. I reckon that percentage is probably 25-30% of people I speak to are in a similar situation. But I'm not going to get to know that unless I am able to give you that information to begin with. And then suddenly you go, oh, I'm not alone. Absolutely not alone. There's somebody else there. And I've met people along my networking journey, some in Only, some out in other networks, who I still speak to because of the caring connection. Absolutely. And I will always talk to them. It doesn't matter which world we're in. I will always keep them close, because I get what they go through on a day-to-day basis. And when I'm thinking things that I probably shouldn't think or share, I can share it with those people because they get it. They understand it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, there's a really good comment from Lisa. Hi, Lisa. Corporate conditioning. Yeah, that's an interesting phrase, because that leads us on to the part about us changing networking, or attempting to change networking based on the corporate networking, if you like, that we first experienced. Kelly, I mean, wasn't it? If you go back to, we're going back, oh dear, I don't want to think.
A long time.
At least 10 years. No, it's been like 15 years. But, our exposure to networking, and this is one of those sign of the time kind of watershed moments. Our experience of networking was BNI. BNI, we've got a lot to be thankful for.
Definitely.
But it was as a culture, it was very much like you didn't really talk about your family. The BNI rules don't allow for any kind of, the BNI ruling wouldn't care that your special needs child had a meltdown.
Back then, yeah.
You couldn't attend. And I know, this is not to knock BNI, but
no, definitely not.
They were as much of the culture of the period as they were the setters of the culture. But it wasn't it, Kelly? It was male dominated, because we are still, it was pretty much that, men were the ones that were allowed to run businesses and go and have those breakfasts in the morning, because typically the women were the ones that were getting the kids to school. I'm making some awful generalizations.
You are, yeah.
But would you agree it was mostly kind of panned out that way?
It was, and I think that's why I personally think why there's been such a big shift in networking over the last 6 months. I think it's settled in the last 6 months, but there's been some huge shifts, and we see that demographic split. I feel very comfortable in that male-dominated world. I can hold my own in that space, and I've shared this before. I got a lot of business from that group. I was one of the only females. I was 22 years old. Do you know what I mean? It was a good environment for me to be in and sell holidays. But that was 22 years ago. If I'd have gone into that group, or if I'd have sent a message and gone, Kennedy's having a meltdown today. 2 things. One, I probably wouldn't have done. I would have sorted it out in the background so that I could have got there, because that was my commitment, and that's what I do. But if I had have done that, I don't think they would have been very open to it. And when we set up Only, that was so important to us. Now, that puts a lot of trust in the members, because we trust our members. They're adults at the end of the day. If they can't make a meeting, they don't need to give us an excuse. They're not there for a reason. And it's obviously a very good reason, because they know if they don't turn up, they miss out on an opportunity. You don't then need me banging the drum saying, right, where were you? What was your excuse? Now, that's not to say that I wouldn't contact somebody who hadn't attended for a couple of months on the trot, because I'd want to know they're okay. Not because I need them to give me an excuse, but because I want to make sure they're okay. And that for us is the difference between that relationship building, relational networking versus the transactional.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think this comment will share from Bernie because it's huge.
Oh, it
It'll
will.
cover.
Oh, leave it there. That's good.
It still goes on. Look, it cuts off at the end there.
Not goes on, continues.
Continue. I'm sorry, Bernie.
Sorry.
His point about building a business, but that, building a business to support other people that have got those circumstances, that's one of those happy accidents, isn't it? But we had to build a business that way. The business for us had to be flexible because we need to be flexible. So there was no point trying to impose loads of rules around attendance because we would be the first people. I mean, we don't generally break those rules because we try our best to, but we couldn't adhere to a lot of rules around networking. And it was the thing that I struggled with that BNI style of networking, is that it made no concession. My issue, see, Kennedy being my stepdaughter, I've known her for 10 years, but before that, my problem was more around mental health. And there were days where, it was a struggle for me to work, let alone, I mean, I was lucky. I actually enjoyed networking, and it was one of the places that I felt okay. But, like you say, Kelly, we don't want to be in a space where there's a dog ate the homework excuse culture, because we all know that it's a silly excuse to kind of follow the rule book, don't we? So, like you say, if you're not going to put into the network, don't expect to take from the network as well.
Again, this is about your own boundaries and stuff, isn't it? I can actually see the rest of Bernie's post. I was just looking at that on my LinkedIn. So he's basically saying thank you. And if those members that know us will see signs within only as to our why with the business, because they're actually in the business itself. So thank you, Bernie. And he says, thank you, keep up the great work. I want to kind of touch on that, because any good brand, once you buy into it, you get involved in it, you see what it's outputting, whether it's product, services, doesn't matter what it is. It could be Nespresso. If you really love that brand, you'll look into it more, and you will start to see the brand's core values coming through in the products and services that it delivers. So thank you, Bernie, because I think that we would have loved for that to happen, and that was very important to us, wasn't it, for the things that we provide for people based off of our experience as carers. So thank you. And Lisa's saying break your own rules, which is absolutely true. So going back to your point, James, you were disciplined enough to know that if you were having a bad day, you'd go and do it anyway, because you knew that it would make you feel better, regardless of the factors. It might have been a real struggle for you to get there in the first place. You were able to be disciplined enough to push through and do it. A lot of people won't be. And I would just urge you to say, the number of times I've had somebody come on to a call with us and maybe message me privately and say, do you know what, I really wasn't up for today because I'm just not in a good place for whatever reason, but I am so pleased I did, because I just feel upbeat, positive. I'm almost buzzing now, and I can go and get on with my day. That's the power of people. That's not us necessarily. We house that in a wonderful community of fantastic people. So we highlight great people in order for you to have that experience. But that's you going over and above, pushing your boundaries and going, no, I can do this, and I'm going to do this because I know it's going to be better for me. So even when it's really, really tough, just push that extra bit harder, because you will absolutely thank yourself for it at the end.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing about it's around the authenticity thing again, isn't it? And building a brand, the difference between a platitude and a plaque on the wall. So you can state anything, can't you? You can say my business stands for this, but then all your actions and rules drive a completely different behavior. Customer service was always the classic one. The plaque on the wall says all of our customers, we treat all of our customers like royalty or some variation of that. But then we're going to set you targets that are all about volume. So, when I worked in a call center, what we're actually doing is encouraging you to throw that slip of paper in the bin, because we're not going to give you the time to actually circle back and fix that problem. Right? There's a reason why when you call a call center, you don't always get the thing done, because the rule is completely different from the platitude. And I think for us, the realization of the things that were always deemed to be immutable parts of running a business, like you've got to be available to work 9 to 5.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to go networking at 6:30 in the morning. You've got to be able to do this. All of that stuff's anachronistic. Like you've still got to do what you say you're going to do, but you don't have to do it in a 9 to 5 structure, because I wouldn't care, quite frankly, if you did it at 12 o'clock at night, if that suits your sensibilities and your schedule. And I think that's the network that I like to think we've already built and are continuing to develop, Kelly, isn't it? One where it says you don't have to adhere to these outdated rules, because they exclude a lot of people. You know, like you touched on earlier, people that can't drive, well, people that are in isolated areas, people that find networking intimidating because they're a little bit introverted. We wanted to build a network that made everyone feel welcome, and you decide how much you input and how much you then output.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, you became a business owner because you wanted to make your own rules up. So you shouldn't allow any network or community dictate that to you. Sounds too obvious, doesn't it? But that's kind of common sense. Lisa's right, break your own rules. And funnily enough, just as we're talking about breaking rules, Callum pops in. So hello to you as well, Callum. Good to see you. He called us treacles, yeah, which is good. I had a point there which I've completely lost. I think that piece around, no, there we go. So that piece around you need to work when it suits you, I think that's quite challenging for some people. It's challenging for me, coming from a corporate space and being conditioned to work 9 till 5. I still, in the back of my head, go, yeah, but I should be working. Okay, even though I know that I go over and above and I do more hours outside of that. It's easier for me to work those hours as a carer because traditionally they fit in with college, school. So I'm probably even more conditioned to working in that space. But you can, you know, if I work on a Saturday, very rarely, because I do like to have that boundary set, because you do need to make sure you look after yourself. But if I were to work on a Saturday or a Sunday and I was doing emails, I'd schedule them to go on the Monday. I wouldn't send them on the Saturday or Sunday, not because I don't want people to think, oh God, she hasn't got her stuff together because she's working on a Saturday or a Sunday. I don't care about that. I don't want to encroach on somebody else in their free time. So again, that caring mentality, people will like me or they won't. That's fine. I'm just me. I'm just going to be me. And the people that like me will be in my sphere, and those who don't, they'll be in somebody else's. And that's great, because I can't have everybody in my space. So I think people will adapt to the way you work to a certain degree, but you don't need to make that hard for the people that you're working with. So, you know, if I'm sending a response at an obscure time, I shouldn't be expecting somebody to reply to that. You know what I mean? I shouldn't be prioritizing my time over somebody else's.
I think this notion of professionalism really comes down to, in this day and age, doing what you say you're going to do to the deadline or the expectation that you've set. So, you know, what's the service level agreement within that thing that you've said that you're going to do, and then just setting an expectation around, this is when I'll respond. You know, if you need to be in a customer responsive mode, you've just got to set the boundaries of what that time that would be. And then I think it's down to you to have conversations with the individual clients to say, look, you may have to give me a little bit of flexibility around that time. I always had a rule in my business that I'd always over deliver against what I was paid for, because I would like to think that you'll give me a little bit of leeway if I'm having a challenge around time, or, you know, or whatever it might be. So I think that's all people need now, isn't it, Kelly? Just be clear about what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and what the expectation is of a response.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, in that sort of sharing, I've never, ever had an email out of office or a conversation with a client to say, you'll have to bear with me because obviously I'm a carer. And I've never done that, because I know my boundaries. I know what works for me. I know I know better than to overpromise. Okay, so that is about setting your boundaries first and foremost. She says, trying to get this into her head, because sometimes I do let them down. But knowing what you are willing and not willing to do, what your SLAs are, what the expectations are, you know, all of that stuff, because until you know them yourself, you're never going to confidently be able to give that to other people.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's start to think about wrapping up. If anyone's got any tips, should we talk about sort of scheduling things and, you know, juggling? Have you got any tips, Kelly, around tools, system planning?
Yeah, I just think this will come down to the individual, won't it? I think time is a wonderful thing and it will just fly by. So it's about managing your time most effectively. It's also that age-old thing, and I think of Paul Hill when I think of this. It's the oxygen mask analogy, isn't it? Looking after yourself first. If you're a carer, you can't possibly give your 100% and your all to that person you're caring for if you're not there yourself. So you do have to make sure that you're kind of prioritizing yourself to a degree. It does take time to figure that one out. Yeah, it certainly does. So I think I'll come to Callum's point in a minute, but I think for me it is being comfortable and content in your own space. I've got masses of to-do lists. I'm very good at walking away from them, but it's prioritizing, okay, well, does this thing with Kennedy need to be sorted urgently, or does it need to be the business that I need to look at today? And I used to sit on the stuff with Kennedy too much, and I didn't used to prioritize it. And it was the amazing Louise Miller that through one of her workshops, it was like a ta-da moment where it was just like, clear that stuff, deal with that stuff, because actually that's the stuff that's sitting in here and causing you a problem at work, not the work stuff, it's the personal stuff. So I think my kind of shout out to carers would be, if you're caring and you're juggling business probably feels harder because you don't have your ducks in a row in the personal space. So get that bit sorted and you will see a flow come through to the business as well.
You need a bit of headspace, don't you? So Callum's point about the email signature, yeah, that's a good way of wording it. So thank you, Callum. Kelly, any final tips? You are officially the queen of resilience. You are. Any tips from, like, how do you do it? How do you keep positive and juggle all of those things, knowing that you can't, you know, you can plan as much as you want, but part of this as a carer is that you have to adapt, don't you?
Yeah.
So the mental toughness that's required in order to, you know, keep adapting. That's the bit that I struggle with. There's no predictability is quite a challenge, isn't it? So have you got any tips around just being resilient?
Yeah, I mean, I've had 17 years at this, so I think it's ingrained in me now, which helps. It still takes me by surprise sometimes, and it will be sod's law the day you've got 1,000,001 things to do, and you really, I just did, 1,000,001 things to do, and you really don't have any space in your schedule. The school bus turns up late, and then an hour later you get a call to say that she needs to come home because she's poorly. It's always going to happen. It's always going to happen. So I think for me, it's about that. That's okay. Like, I genuinely can't do anything about that. So I'm possibly going to become unreliable in that moment. I'm possibly going to have to cancel a couple of things. But you know what? I'll reschedule them, won't I? Of course I will. Because that's who I am and that's what I'll do at the best possible time that I can. I think for me, and I make this sound too easy, is I'm very black and white. Okay, there's not a lot of grey areas in many things for me, because I truly believe that I've got a choice. I just keep going or I don't. And if I don't keep going, what does my life look like in that space? And that's not somewhere where I want to spend a lot of time. And you're laughing and I'm almost laughing, because if I could bottle that and I could describe that in a better way, I'd be a millionaire and I wouldn't have to worry about any of this stuff. But there is no option for me,
isn't it? That's the challenge, because basically you're going, just be all right with it. And, you know, ultimately you're right. I think it's probably about where you position it mentally. Do you go down the route of allowing the negativity around the negative thoughts to kind of dominate?
Yeah.
Do you feel sorry for yourself? Do you stress about, I haven't done this, I haven't done that? Or do you try and look at the positives in it? And enjoy it as much as you can, because it's not, you know, there is a lot of good times and you've got to cut. Well, Bernie's made a really good point about charging your batteries. I mean, that's something we do, isn't it, Kelly? We try and, even just finishing a little bit earlier and nipping out to the shops for a few hours. It doesn't always have to be a holiday in the Bahamas, does it? It can just be have those little moments for yourself and then store that up so that when things are particularly difficult, it will cycle round. It will.
Yeah, and do you know what? I'm sat racking my brains trying to think of a better way to explain it. I've got quite a lot of variety in my life. So my life is it is Groundhog Day in so much as you give me a date and I'll tell you what I'm going to be doing on that day. It will depend on whether Kennedy's here, whether she's with her dad, whether she's out with a carer, whether she's at college, whether it's a work day, whether it's a weekend. But the reason I share that is because that's okay for me, because I know that once I'm in, I think we're very lucky with the support we get from family, but we'll have a period of say 5 days and nights where Kennedy's here and then she'll go somewhere for a night or whatever. That 5 day period would be very easy to get caught up in. Oh my goodness, that's 5 days of hard work. Also a lot of fun, but that's 5 days with Kennedy. I get to spend 5 days with Kennedy, and then I've got a day today, prime example. I could probably finish at 4 today, put my PJs on, take my lipstick off, read my book. I don't need to be going out gallivanting, buying loads of things, having wonderful meals out. For me, I just need that change of mode to be able to recharge. So whether you're a carer, whether you face, mental health issues, whether you're lonely, it's a change in your circumstance, isn't it? That gives you that recharge opportunity. And if you're not having positive recharge opportunities, you are going to find it incredibly hard.
Well, and if you don't because we are lucky with respite, aren't we? Because there's a few people in the family that do help us out. And I know there will be families that don't have that. Yeah. There are more support options available than you perhaps realize. I mean, we didn't know most of them, did we? We've been quite self-sufficient, but we found out in the last few years Kennedy should have a social worker, for example, and that's opened doors to other opportunities to get care and support. So, hopefully you're aware of them, but any carers watching this that think they're on their own, there are, it's quite hard to access. No one's going to make it easy, but there is money, there is funding, there is support available. So, that could be something. Just contact Kelly.
Just drop me a message. Yeah, I mean, in the special, in the SEN world, I've got tons. I've got lots of knowledge. I've been through all sorts of tribunals, complaints. Oh God, you name it. I've done them all in the last couple of years, and I'm always happy to help people if they need something. A couple of things just for me is it's nice to be around people that support you and drive you and lift you up. I've tried to become involved with caring communities previously, and with the exception of one, they've never been very positive experiences. So I just a little sort of half raising my red flag there to say they can.
Why? What was the experience? Lots of negative people.
Lots of negativity, yeah. And because to me, I don't see it as a negative, and I've had to tell myself that a lot over the years. But I truly believe that now. I'm not in a negative space. My life could be a heck of a lot worse, and Kennedy's life could be a heck of a lot worse. So I don't need a community to go in and air my dirty laundry and feel a bit woe is me, because it doesn't help me and it doesn't help anybody else in that group. And unfortunately, because there is a lot of lack of support for people in that space when it is really bad, it can sometimes become a bit of a drain. I mean, there will be wonderful communities out there, and please feel free to introduce me to them if you've got one. But I think there is a tendency, human nature is to come together and have a moan, isn't it? And then we kind of get drawn into that, oh God, yeah, and this is really bad and that's awful, which leads me on to the second point of, I mean, we live in Hampshire, and Hampshire is notoriously bad for SEN support, social care support. We've been told that numerous times, hence having so many tribunals and this, that and the other. It's you almost feel like those who shout the loudest get the most information. Hello, Susan. Liking this discussion. Oh, you're a carer as well. Well done to you. You're coming in towards the end of it, but it's lovely to have you here. But feel free to use the chat box and obviously get involved in the conversation. I think for me, it's only because I've had to start shouting over the last couple of years, which those of you who know me will be very surprised to hear that I didn't shout for 15 years. I just let it all carry on and continue and just work really hard to do it all around the outsides. And then I went, do you know what? It's got to be more out there support wise. And I've banged the drum for Kennedy as a result. We still get very little support. We still don't get listened to, and we still have to fight our cause. But I am being told by key people within the authority, oh, well, you really need to look at this. Oh, between us, you could try this. And the fact that that's not just common knowledge is just criminal. It's just criminal.
We've talked about it. Like, how would it be communicated? I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? That
and the authorities work in silos and they don't cross over generally. So I know the big bugbear for me is having to tell an expert about Kennedy, which will take me an hour by the time they've questioned me, and then they'll go to their colleague and I'll speak to a week later and there's no notes on the system. I've got to do it all again. I could record it and just hit play on it, quite frankly. But I think another big piece of information I would say is document everything. It's particularly if you're a parent with a young child in that world. I wish I'd have documented everything since Kennedy was younger, and I've only been doing it for the last couple of years, but the ability to reflect back on that and see where the gaps were was just huge, because you won't be able to prove that 15 years down the line unless you do it. So that's a one for me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Callie. Well, I hope that's been of interest. Thank you for listening. If anyone stayed on the whole time, put a message in the chat. Now we'll get no messages.
Now we're leaving. Yeah.
As we're leaving. But no, thank you for listening. And, just hopefully we've raised a little bit of awareness of the subject. Just talk about it. The business and caring are just one and the same. Like Bernie was saying, the work-life balance, it is one and the same for a lot of people, isn't it? So, there is some help and support out there. So Lisa has been there the whole time.
Lisa, thank you.
Well done, Lisa. Thank you, Bernie. Well, this has been Adventures in Networking. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next month. Bye.
Bye.